Well, it is a key part of the government's immigration policy to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. Last week, the High Court ruled the flight, today's flight, it's on the ground right now, we'll show you some live pictures shortly of it, could go ahead today. Key word there, could go ahead today. Legal appeals to that ruling, they've been taking place throughout today. The flight, there it is, live pictures from MOD Boscombe. It's near Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire. If you know the area, you can just about see it from the A303 as you sometimes head westwards, bound for points west and Cornwall for those summer holidays, not far from Stonehenge. The flight is believed to be there on standby, and it's believed, though we can talk about this in just a second, that perhaps as few as 7, maybe fewer, asylum seekers are on board. Meanwhile, the political temperature's been rising. Church leaders have condemned the policy. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, said it would, quote, establish the principle and break people traffickers' business models. There's the live pictures. Let's leave those pictures up and bring in Stephen Woolfe, who's the editor of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, who explained with such clarity yesterday what the legal position is. Stephen used to be, before he went into politics, a barrister, so he knows whereof he speaks. Stephen Woolfe, welcome to you, and thanks for your expertise. Definitely. You think it's as few as maybe 4 now? Yes,
we're hearing that between another 3 have got cases of appeals, and those appeals might be enough to be able to justify them not going on the flights. They're actually also trying cases along an argument along the Modern Slavery Act. So they're going to be slaves in some way when they get to Rwanda. So what you're seeing is the immigration industry are coming up with any particular idea legally to try and prevent these cases from going ahead. And I think it's lamentable. I think it's going to backfire on these people and the charities that work with them. I think it's going to give support to the government because the mass of the population believe this is a really important policy, a policy that says that if you come to this country, you should be a genuine asylum seeker. We know that many are economic migrants, and therefore you should be tested and assessed. And as we're full, Rwanda is a good option.
Let's stay on Stephen, let's stay on these live pictures and bring in Tonia Buxton, who's going to be alongside me for the next couple of hours today. Tonia, Stephen says this will be good for the government. I think he's right about that. I think people will look at these demonstrations, the legal judgments, the lawfare, as they call it in America, and they will be supportive of the government. But I think Stephen's wrong when he says actually it will backfire on the NGOs and the charities and those people mounting these legal bids because this is what they live for.
I happen to think that it's going to backfire on the charities because we are all suffering now in Britain. I mean, we have a standard of living that's dropping and dropping and dropping, and the money that these charities are getting to launch these legal cases. I mean, do we have rule of lawyers now? Is that what happens? The judge and the court have decided that flight should be taking off, and the lawyers are doing all they can to stop it from happening. Lawyers don't do anything unless they're getting paid. So, you know, if you follow the money, that money is my money. It's my taxes that are paying for this. And so I think the charities are going to get a backfiring.
And in terms, Stephen, of where the matter rests legally, the plane, the Court of Appeal yesterday ruled that the plane can legally leave. That's a sort of collective judgment. Then there's individual judgments about individual asylum seekers. And they're now making these individual claims, Stephen. And that's what's happening now. That's why we've got the delay.
Absolutely. And this is where you're going to see a mass of cases all being pushed through the courts. And I think in some ways one of the tactics that will be used by the lawyers and of course, the NGOs, charities and the trade unions that are backing these legal cases is to overwhelm the government's legal services and the courts with these cases to delay as many people as possible. And again, I think people are going to see this for what it actually is. It's an attempt by an elitist group of organisations, many who are funded by their local authorities and by national governments. And that's why I agree that there's going to be a backlash. People are going to start asking, where is the money coming from? Why is my local authority providing cash to these charities that are then being used quite politically to oppose a government policy? And I think everybody should be now asking their local authorities for freedom of information requests about how much they're funding these organisations. But a backlash is also going to come across people like Prince Charles, the bishops who wrote the letter today, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, who are going to drive a wedge between their elitist views and those of the people who believe that this is an appropriate policy to pursue.
Tonia Buxton, Brendan O'Neill of Spiked Online wrote yesterday, this isn't actually about who's going to be deported, where they're going to, it's about who runs Britain. And he says, is it about the 14 million people who put in this government to enact the policies they put in their manifesto, including on immigration? Or is it, as Stephen says, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Prince Charles, if you believe the comments he's alleged to have made describing this policy as an ugly one, the House of Lords and the NGOs? Who's in charge? Who decides?
Well, all I can say is that for the longest time, these people have been in charge. But, you know, we've had 2 years of a lockdown we should never have had. We've had all this austerity, and we are going to rear our heads and we are going to have a revolution because we voted. We live in a democratic country and we want what we voted to happen. And the way that they twist things, like, oh, you're not a humanitarian if you agree with what's going on in Rwanda. Well, actually, I am a humanitarian. You know, if you're crossing the channel, you're doing it because you've got money or muscle. And they are criminal gangs. So we've got to do something to stop them. So if this is what we've come up with for now, we should be doing this. And the general public believe in that.
Stephen, I disagree with Tonia that there'll be no revolution. There'll be a lot of disquiet about this. And what there ought to be is people mounting the case, the argument for an alternative. And the truth is, as things currently stand, with the French not minded to play ball, there ain't one.
There isn't any real serious alternative. The alternative that Keir Starmer tries to put out, in which he will put an assessment centre in France in agreement with the French government, I think is farcical. I think it's pie in the sky. Because the French weren't working with us whilst we were a member of the European Union, and they're certainly not working with us now that we've left the European Union. And politically, it's too difficult for them to start allowing more migrants to stay in their country.
Stephen, we're going to keep across those live pictures. We'll bring them back to our viewers, if not our listeners, because they can't see them shortly. In a word, yes or no, can this plane fly empty with no asylum seekers on board as a symbolic flight? No, that's not.
No, absolutely not. It has to have somebody on it.
OK. Stephen Woolfe, thanks very much indeed.